Today we are in the state of Oregon, helping you find the right home equity line of credit in the second position. Let's take a look at the whiteboard. Let me show you my framework on the left-hand side. This is your pregame work. This is the additional data that you need to obtain from the bank or acquire yourself in terms of credit score, your own personal DTI, and figuring out your own loan to value on your property. The rest of the details is really referring to the information that you'll need to acquire from each bank directly. Not every bank is going to display this information on their website publicly. You're going to need to pick up the phone and call. So what this video and this entire series is doing is giving you the framework, giving you the how-to, all the pregame steps, and it's giving you an idea of what banks I'm looking at, what research I'm doing, how I'm doing my research, so that you can basically match that in the state that you're in and see if you can beat what I found already for you. So I'm doing a lot of the legwork in advance, giving you the framework. And then on the right-hand side of the board here, specifically for the state of Oregon, I picked out some banks that caught my eye with the little information that each bank does provide. Like I said, they're not going to give me everything in terms of what they're looking for in an applicant, but they're going to typically provide some details to explain what their HELOC is, how it works, and the cost behind it. So I was able to find you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 banks, or six, yeah, 6 banks in the state of Oregon that caught my eye. Now, what I'm going to do is share my screen and just go through each and every bank I found and explain why some didn't make it to the whiteboard and why these ones did make it to the whiteboard, right? And what I'm typically looking at, okay? So here we are, starting with Consolidated Community Credit Union was actually the last bank I found. I was like doing additional research. But if we go here to Google, just so you can see what I'm typing in, I typically start with credit unions in the state that I'm looking at, and I'll type that offer a home equity line of credit. So this way it narrows banks that don't offer HELOCs. I'm not interested in those. I want to strictly focus on credit unions in your state that's offering a home equity line of credit. And in this series, we're focusing on the second position, HELOC. So Consolidated Community Credit Union was the last bank that I found and happens to be like one of the most attractive ones. Okay, so again, when you're paying attention to my framework, one of the things I asked for in the framework is, does the bank offer an intro rate? And how is the interest rate calculation determined? Is the home equity line of credit based off of a prime minus, a prime standard, or prime plus? All right, so prime minus meaning today's interest rates are at 6.75%. That's the current prime rate in January 2026 today. So if a bank says, hey, our HELOCs is based off of prime and nothing afterwards, then you know, okay, the lowest interest rate I can get on this HELOC will be whatever prime is, 6.75%. So the first thing they show is you get a rate of 4.99% for the first 12 months. So that's an intro rate. They also say, hey, we'll cover your setup fees. So either all or some of your closing costs will be covered. That's a plus. Here we have another plus, no annual fees. We like that. So pretty much no cost to get in, no cost to maintain it. Home equity line of credit. And then we continue to read. It says here, including title and document searches covered up to $500. Any closing costs beyond $500 are the responsibility of the borrower. So clearly they're covering some, and maybe in some cases it's all of your closing costs, but we'll assume that they cover most of your closing costs. That's very helpful. Then we have statement here. It says interest rate structure once every quarter, 5 or 15 years based on prime, currently 6.75%, with a maximum of 18% as of 12/11/2025. That's when interest rates recently decreased, so they updated their website accordingly. So that is very attractive. What we need to get clarity on is this quarter, 5 or 15 years. If you scroll down, owner occupied, variable rate, APR as low as, after the intro rate, 6.25%. That's quarterly, meaning it's saying the term of your home equity line of credit is quarterly. So every 3 months, the interest rate can adjust, right? And then we have a 5-year where it's saying, okay, it'll be at prime for the next 5 years, is how I'm interpreting it. And then same thing with the 15-year. So this is something where we can call the bank, get a little more information, just so that we fully understand what we're getting into. Another plus is that they have easy access regarding the velocity strategy, money in, money out. Easy access, mobile banking friendly. So definitely made it to the whiteboard. Definitely a bank you want to have on your list. And you can get more clarity here on the HELOC itself. I'm not sure what the draw period is. All right, so because it says the term. Usually term means the draw period duration. So I don't often see where it's saying, okay, the term is quarterly. So for how many quarters will my home equity line of credit be revolving for? If it's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, right? Let's figure that out. All in all, it made it to the whiteboard. Continuing on, I found you another bank, Oregon State Credit Union. Another pretty attractive bank here. They've got a prime. Their interest rate is based off prime. Annual fee is waived in the first year, so there is a annual fee afterwards. Max credit line $400,000. That's pretty attractive. 90% LTV, 10-year draw. Easy access with mobile banking friendly. So it checks a lot of the boxes, but again, you want to call, you want to get all the rest of the details. You know, hey, what's the DTI? What's the closing costs? Ask all those questions before you apply, and make sure that you become a member at the bank you end up choosing that you want to do business with. Make sure you open up an account first, right? Open up a checking, open up a savings. Become a member. Typically, when you do that, you're going to get access to an even better offer, more than likely. Some banks don't even let you apply with them until you're a member. So don't waste your credit score applying at a bank that you're not a member at. Very, very important. So here we have another bank, OCCU, didn't make it to the whiteboard simply because I just looked at the rate. I've already found banks that are at a prime or prime minus. According to this, now this might be the case where their rates might actually be 6.75%. Not every bank has updated their site. I'm recording this video on January 7th, 2026. Usually it takes about a month, a couple weeks after a rate cut has been announced where the bank will update their site. So just going off what they're showing, this looks like prime plus 0.25%. But it could be the case that it's actually based off prime. We don't know. They don't give additional details. Wasn't able to see that as I went through everything here. It says it again, rates vary from 7 to 11%. Oh, never mind, actually. So rates as of January 5th, current APR 9.17 and 9.37. But that is based off their home equity loan. This is based off the home equity line of credit, this first paragraph. And it does say as of 1/1/2026. So we can actually rely on this. This would be prime plus 0.25%. I'm going to go ahead and ignore them. Found another bank, Mid-Oregon Credit Union. Didn't get much information. So that's the only reason why they didn't make it to the whiteboard. I see this 80% LTV. I see the mobile banking friendly part. It says you got to call, all right, to get the other details. But still want to show you my research. Inroads Credit Union did make it to the whiteboard because they offer a prime minus 0.25%, as you can see, low as 6.5%. Mobile banking friendly. They do have an annual fee. Their closing costs are between $500 and $1,300, but they still make it to the whiteboard because of that prime minus. That's pretty attractive. Another bank, Cascade Community Credit Union, did not make it to the board. Go to real estate here. Here's why. It's prime plus 0.5%. Not attractive compared to what I've already found you. Here's a bank called On Point Community Credit Union. I have clients who use this bank. Not my favorite, but it is a bank that some people have used. They got this 10-year draw, 80% LTV, 7.5%, 7.5%. They have a first lien between 6 and 6.75% fixed. So it could be attractive from a first lien position, but the second position HELOC, I didn't throw it on the board because of that prime plus. Selco, interesting offer they got here. By the way, Oregon seems to be a very competitive state in terms of more banks offering home equity line of credits with some pretty unique offers. So this one's pretty unique. I threw it on the board. Selco Community Credit Union has a fixed home equity line of credit for 6 years, with the first 5 years annual fee being waived, and you get this 6% rate. So that's prime minus 0.75%. That's very attractive. Now, context. Let me give you guys some additional context here. When does it make sense to choose a fixed rate home equity line of credit over a variable rate home equity line of credit? I would say, in my opinion and my experience, I prefer to have a fixed home equity line of credit that is at least 1 to 2% below prime for that 3 to 5 year window. That's the typical range. This is definitely out of the ordinary. 6-year fixed rate is out of the ordinary. You're not going to see that every day, but you will see 2 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years. It's a little more common, but even those are kind of rare. And if you can get a rate between 1 to 2% below prime, that's extremely attractive, because over the next 5 years, what's the likelihood that rates go below what your fixed rate is? If you do a little bit of a deeper dive to get a better understanding of how interest rates work, and if you just simply Google something like, are we in a declining interest rate environment or are we in a increasing interest rate environment? So when we are in a declining interest rate environment, it can be quite attractive to lock in a fixed rate. And when you have already seen rates come down, it can make it even more attractive to say, okay, it's likely that we're going to keep going in this direction. It's 2026. I can probably give myself a head start. Worst case scenario, rates continue to go down, but I already benefited a year to 2 years in advance. And if I made all the right moves and rates continue to decrease, well, guess what? When my fixed rate expires, now my rate drops even more. Now, if here's where it becomes even more advantageous is you lock in a fixed rate in a declining interest rate environment. So let's look at history. Go back a couple of years, the prime interest rate went up as high as 8.5%. 2026, now it's at 6.75%. So it's dropped almost 2 points over the last year and a half, right? It was towards the end of 2024 when we saw our first rate cut. And then we saw 3 rate cuts, if I'm not mistaken, in 2025. And now going into 2026, depending on where the economy goes, depending on how the administration wants to keep operating, we might likely see more interest rates continue to be reduced. So let's say it continues to go in that direction, but then prime stops at about 6.25% and it just stays there. Okay. You're still at an advantage with your 6% fixed rate home equity line of credit that you locked in from 2026 for the next 6 years. And then let's say interest rates reverse and start to go up in the event we switch administration. So keep in mind 2026, and you can do this in any time frame that you're looking at. As of right now, it's 2026. Under the current administration, it will last until 2028. So if you do a little research and you look up, okay, what are the top priorities? What are the top agendas for the Trump administration? Boom, we'll do a little research. Okay, there's a big emphasis on tariffs. There's a big emphasis on wanting to reduce interest rates, wanting to make things more affordable. So you look at those top concerns that apply to your financial economy, being your home equity line of credit, interest rates, how you're borrowing, and we can draw a healthy hypothesis, an assumption, and say, okay, for at least the next 2 years, 2026, 2028, we'll likely see more rates decrease. That's been the trend so far in this current administration. 2028 hits, if it flips from Republican to Democrat, then we might see interest rates go up, potentially. That's something you can keep in mind. Well, guess what? That would be in your favor. Anyways, it wouldn't harm you that you took the fixed rate home equity line of credit at the 6% to a increasing interest rate environment. If we remain under a Republican administration going into 2028, that's another 4 consistent years compared to the previous 4 consistent years. What is the likelihood that if we go from Republican administration to another Republican administration, what's the likelihood that the agendas radically change? Very unlikely. Very unlikely. So that gives you the space to make that decision to say, yep, you know what, I'm going to go with this fixed rate option for the next 6 years. plus you factor in how long is it going to take you to become debt free with all the things you're looking to accelerate, looking to pay off. And if you have a window of 5 to 7 years, you're giving yourself like a guarantee with a 6% home equity line of credit rate, and you look at all your other debts that are higher than 6%, let's just say car loans, student loans, personal loans, maybe even your home loan, you put yourself in a very, very advantageous position for the next 6 years. So there's a lot of pros. The only time it's a con, I would say, to lock in a fixed rate home equity line of credit is when the fixed rate is higher than prime currently, no matter what environment we're in. If it's higher than prime, that's not attractive. And if we're in a, let's say you're in this declining interest rate environment. So let's go back to 2018, 2019, 2020, interest rates were extremely low. Okay? They were really low. If you locked in a fixed rate at that point, you did amazing. Congratulations, because you were able to avoid the interest hike in that event. So then let's say we're now at all-time highs. Fast forward 2023, a little bit of 2024. So it's like mostly 22, 2023, we're at very, very high interest rates. You agree? We were hitting 7.5, then it went to 8, and went to 8.25, 8.5. I think it stopped right on 8.5%. If you locked in a fixed rate, even if it was a half a point below prime or right at prime, that would have been a bad move. Because if you're not paying attention to what's going on in the United States, if you're not paying attention to the election cycles and how that has an effect on your money, then you definitely dropped the ball. Because if you saw, okay, we're under a Democratic administration, we saw 2024 election where we were current from 2020, right, to 2024, we're under a Democratic administration, right? And rates went up. So if you weren't paying attention and boom, Trump gets elected, you lock in a fixed rate at 8.5% or say 8%, you lock in a fixed rate for 5, 6 years, you screwed up. Because within a year and a half, we saw that 8.5, boom, drop all the way down to now 6.75%. You're hurting bad sitting at that 8.5% rate if you're that person. You're hurting bad. It's absolutely worth getting out of that, even if it potentially may come with some costs. It's going to be absolutely worth coming out of that, especially if I can go from 8.5 and you're telling me I could lock in a 6. Oh my goodness, that's 2.5 points decreased. Okay? So keep that in mind. Very, very important. That's when it makes sense to lock in a fixed rate home equity line of credit. There's a lot of scenarios where it does make sense, and where it may not make sense is if, again, that scenario about being in a high interest rate environment and then locking something in a high interest rate environment despite going to a decreasing. You almost want to wait. That's the key. You want to wait a little bit. Allow the new administration to come in, and look what happened. It flipped Democrat to Republican, and it took a little time, but then we started seeing rate cut, rate cut, rate cut, rate cut, rate cut. So you want to pay attention to that, where it's like, okay, now we're seeing offers like this across the country that are popping up. that were once extremely rare are becoming a little more common now, a little more attractive. And this is gonna be amazing for the person that lives in Oregon, that does their pregame work, that follows the framework, that potentially locks in with Selco community and makes that decision to take the next 6 years, take a bet. You've got the rest of this administration, you got one more to go in your fixed period. And if you're thinking we're likely going to stay this way under a Republican administration, or do you think it's going to flip back to Democrat come 2028? Then that's another way you can really make that decision. So that definitely made it to the board. And I believe the draw period, yeah, okay, so it's between 5 and 15 years. All right, so if it's as short as 5 years, not the best, but then that wouldn't make sense definitely if it's a 6-year fixed HELOC. It's definitely going to be longer than 6 years in terms of the draw. We got no application or origination fees, closing costs are paid by Selco. So there's a big possibility here a lot of your closing costs gets covered, which is pretty cool. Moving on, we have MAPS Credit Union. Didn't make it to the board. Let me see. Wait, why didn't I put them on the board? Let's hold on. So I have a couple of different types of HELOCs here. 10-year draw, 85% LTV, line of credit, no app fee, up to 500K, between 6.5% and 9%. So that would be prime minus 0.25. And then interest. Okay, so a home equity master line would be principal and interest payments. Home equity master line interest only is obviously interest only payments. You can actually get a little bit. Oh no, it's the same. 500K. So 7% fixed. This wouldn't be as attractive. See, if you were to lock in with this bank, 7%, which is 0.25% above prime, you lock that in for 5 years, that's not smart. Because why? We're still in a declining interest rate environment. You don't want to lock in a fixed rate above prime while rates are going down, because then you don't benefit. You miss out. But if you can get something like Selco, 6%, and prime is still at 6.75, there's still a ways to go before it ever gets to 6%. All right, so keep that in mind. I'm actually going to throw maps on the board since I missed them. But it's worth it. They're definitely worth mentioning. So MAPS Credit Union with the 6.5 to 9%. You just have to find out, okay, what do I need to have to be considered at the 6.5%? Because that's prime minus 0.25. That's important. We want to find that out. It is attractive that they do a 500K max credit line. They're just flat out sharing that. Here's the next bank in bold, Credit Union. 90%, 6.99, so that's above prime. I immediately ignored them as I kept going. We got Rogue. Rogue is 6.24. That was immediately, thrown on the board. That's basically minus 0.5%. And we got no annual fees. Didn't get much information after that, but definitely threw them on the board. Then we got four RIT Credit Union. Did not make it to the board simply because they didn't have enough information. They have a home equity loan at this 6.48%, but as you can see, they didn't show what about the prime line home equity line of credit. Yeah, it takes me to the same page. Looks like you can get as much as 600K. They'll cover some closing costs. So there's some attraction here. But I just didn't put them on the board simply because I wasn't getting the information that I wanted. If we keep looking here, see if it gives it away, 80% LTV. This is again going off the home equity loan. Okay, yeah. So prime line, home equity line of credit is based on prime plus a margin. And your margin is based on your credit worthiness. And it's only a 7-year draw period, so not attractive. True West, I would throw them on the board because of this one detail. You can get up to $750,000 credit line, borrowing up to 75% LTV, 10-year interest-only payments. I just don't have enough data, but I do want to mention them. It does say based on index rate plus a margin, probably because of how much equity they're able to lend on. So if you get a 0.5+% margin, you'd be at 7.27%. I mean, it's not horrible, but is it worth it to you to have that much credit limit if you have that available in your home? And if so, then you're going to want to look at MAPS Credit Union because they offer 500. You want to look at Oregon because they offer 400K. You're going to want to look at maybe Selco can help you. So before you just say yes, make sure you do your little comparison. Peak Credit Union, honorable mention. They're at prime, just prime, straight, 80%. Last bank is Central Willamette Credit Union. They have this 4.99 for 6 months, but then they really bump you. It says 7.5%, so that's prime plus 0.75. That even though I get a nice 4.9 intro, as you saw earlier, Consolidated Credit Union was also doing 4.99, but for 12 months. Okay, so all in all, my top picks, I like Consolidated Community Credit Union, I like Selco, and I like Rogue. All of these banks are either at a prime minus, with intro rates, with no annual fees, with very little closing costs, in some cases covering all my closing costs. So you really can't go wrong with the selection that I've given you here if you live in the state of Oregon. But you still want to make sure you do this. Get all this done. Make sure you know your credit score. Make sure you know what your DTI is. Make sure you're asking them what the DTI needs to be to get the best rate. What are the LTV options? If I request a 90% or more LTV rate, does that increase my interest rate calculation? In many cases, the answer is yes. So the lower the LTV that you borrow, typically the lower your rate offer will be when you combine that with your DTI and your credit score. Pay attention to closing costs and fees. Take a look at that draw period. I prefer to have 10 to 20 years. If it's only going to be 5 to 7, let's just make sure, like, okay, let's run the math on your own numbers and say, okay, will we be out of debt by then? Or would we have accomplished what we're trying to accomplish? Not everyone's trying to be completely debt-free, but many of the people on this channel are either trying to be completely debt-free or pay off the vast majority of their debt except for their mortgage for the most part. If that's the case, let's run the timeline and see if you're going to go with a 5-year draw, will we have everything eliminated by then? Because what I don't want is for you to have that draw period expired. Now you go to a fixed amortized rate. Now you're fighting with no liquidity and trying to make extra payments to pay that down. Now, keep in mind, you're approaching your draw period. You can always call to renew. And it may require going through underwriting all over again, running your credit all over again, but it's absolutely worth it if it means extending the draw period another 5 years if you're trying to do leverage. So keep in mind that as well. Many of you are trying to get out of debt, and some of you are saying, now that I've mastered leveraging debt to pay off debt and saving money and cash flow and interest in the process, what does it look like if I were to leverage debt to actually create more income? The ROI on that is night and day when comparing to paying off debt. Typically, it's like night and day. The potential to leverage debt to earn double-digit returns, cash flow on top of cash flow, plus equity, depending on the asset or the business that comes with it, with the investment, that can open up a lot of opportunity there. So being able to have a healthy draw period, 10 years or longer, allows for you to not only just get out of debt, but also invest with that capital to your advantage to almost catch up. Because those of you who are spending a lot of your time getting out of debt, you're not exactly investing as much money as you want or saving as much money as you want. So if you dedicate the next 5 to 7 years getting out of debt and you're close to retirement, now you're going to feel like you're maybe missing out, or your path to retirement might be slightly delayed. But it depends. There's many cases, and I deal with a lot of them, where it's like, no, it absolutely makes sense to eliminate all this debt because you can guarantee yourself retirement in the next 10 years. If it takes the next 5 years, get rid of all this debt, you guarantee yourself all this cash flow recovery. And then the last 5 years, you can dedicate that to investing and creating more cash flow, setting up the life that you actually desire. So with that being said, that's the state of Oregon today. We're going to continue in this series, helping you find the right home equity line of credit in the second position. My name is Denzel Rodriguez, your personal finance geek of the 21st century. I do coaching, consultation calls. You can click the links below to either get a hold of some of my partners and or myself, and I will help you on a one-to-one basis, or you can join one of my courses, and in my courses, I do live workshops and live financial coaching, things like that. So that's a very inexpensive way to get a hold of me, get my attention, and ask questions and hold yourself accountable. So with that being said, have a wonderful day. God bless, and we'll be talking soon. Bye now.